Imagine a shadow, a silent hand, unseen, yet capable of reaching into the deepest corners of American life, shaping its destiny. This isn't fiction. This is the story of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. How did this agency, born from a whisper of reform, grow to become one of the most powerful and controversial forces in American history? It's a tale of power. Not the power of presidents or generals, but a different kind. The power of information, the power of fear, and the power to define what it means to be an American. The year is 1908. America is a nation on the cusp of greatness, but also a nation riddled with corruption. Industrial titans wield immense influence, labor unrest simmers, and a growing sense of unease permeates the public consciousness. In this volatile landscape, a new player emerges. Not a politician, not a soldier, but a detective. The Bureau of Investigation, as it was then known, was a brainchild of Attorney General Charles Bonaparte. A man of impeccable lineage, a grandson of Napoleon's brother, Bonaparte was deeply troubled by the rampant lawlessness that plagued the nation. He saw a need for a federal entity, a dedicated force to uphold federal laws, a stark contrast to the fragmented and often corrupt local law enforcement of the era. But Bonaparte's vision was met with skepticism. Congress worried about creating a federal police force, a potential threat to individual liberties. They envisioned a small, specialized unit tasked with specific investigations. The early days were humble. A handful of agents operating from a cramped office, their primary tools a magnifying glass and a keen eye. Their initial mandate was narrow: investigating land fraud, interstate theft, and other federal crimes. But the seeds of something far greater were already sown. The world was changing rapidly. The automobile was revolutionizing travel, the telegraph shrinking distances, and with these advancements came new opportunities for criminals to operate beyond state lines. The Bureau needed to adapt, and adapt it did. The early agents were a rugged breed. Many were former Pinkerton detectives, accustomed to the rough and tumble world of private investigation. They were resourceful, tenacious, and often operated in the shadows, gathering intelligence, tracking down fugitives, and building cases against those who sought to exploit the young nation. Think about the challenges they faced. No DNA, no sophisticated surveillance technology, just boots on the ground, informants, and a relentless pursuit of justice. They were America's first federal detectives, tasked with protecting the integrity of a nation still finding its footing. But it was the First World War that truly transformed the Bureau. Suddenly, national security was paramount. Espionage, sabotage, and sedition became real threats. The Bureau found itself on the front lines of a new kind of warfare, one fought not with bullets, but with whispers and secrets. This was the era when J. Edgar Hoover entered the picture. A young, ambitious lawyer, Hoover was a rising star within the Justice Department. He possessed a meticulous mind, an almost obsessive attention to detail, and a profound understanding of the power of organization. He believed the Bureau could be more than just a collection of detectives. He saw it as a vital instrument of national security. Hoover's ascent was meteoric. By 1924, he was appointed acting director of the Bureau, and he wasted no time in reshaping it in his own image. He purged the agency of perceived inefficiencies and political appointees. He implemented standardized procedures, professionalized training, and began building a national fingerprint database that would become a cornerstone of modern law enforcement. But Hoover's vision extended far beyond mere efficiency. He saw the Bureau as a bulwark against perceived threats to American society, and his definition of those threats was broad. Communism, anarchism, organized crime, even individuals who dared to challenge the status quo, all became targets of Hoover's relentless scrutiny. Consider the context. The Roaring Twenties were followed by the Great Depression. Economic hardship fueled social unrest. The rise of powerful crime syndicates like Al Capone's Chicago outfit presented a visible challenge to federal authority. Hoover and his agents were tasked with taking them down, and they did so with a ferocity that captured the public imagination. The capture of John Dillinger, the infamous bank robber, was a watershed moment. The dramatic shootout and Dillinger's demise were plastered across newspapers, solidifying the image of the FBI as a fearless force against public enemies. This was the era of the G-Men, the heroic federal agents who brought order to chaos. But even as the Bureau celebrated these victories, a darker side was beginning to emerge. Hoover's ambition was insatiable. He understood the power of public perception and meticulously cultivated the FBI's image as an incorruptible guardian of American values. He used the media to his advantage, leaking stories, controlling narratives, and building a cult of personality around himself and his agency. And beneath the veneer of heroic law enforcement, a vast intelligence apparatus was being constructed. Hoover began amassing files, not just on criminals, but on anyone he deemed a potential threat: politicians, activists, celebrities, even ordinary citizens who expressed dissenting views. They all found themselves under the Bureau's watchful eye. This was the dawn of the Cold War. A new ideological battleground emerged, and the FBI was at the forefront of the fight against communism. The Red Scares, both the first and the second, saw the Bureau actively engaged in identifying, investigating, and often disrupting perceived communist sympathizers and organizations. Think about the fear that gripped America during these periods. The fear of infiltration, of subversion, of a communist takeover. The FBI, under Hoover, positioned itself as the ultimate protector against this existential threat. They conducted surveillance, infiltrated groups, and used their vast information network to influence public opinion and government policy. But what were the costs of this relentless pursuit of security? Were civil liberties sacrificed at the altar of national safety? These are questions that continue to echo through history, questions that the FBI's story forces us to confront. The Bureau's influence wasn't confined to domestic matters. As America's global power grew, so too did the FBI's reach. During World War II, they played a crucial role in counterintelligence, tracking down spies and saboteurs. And in the post-war era, as the United States became a superpower, the FBI found itself increasingly involved in international investigations and intelligence gathering. They were the eyes and ears of America abroad, working with foreign law enforcement agencies, tracking down fugitives who fled across borders, and gathering information that shaped American foreign policy. The Bureau was no longer just a domestic police force, it was becoming a global player. This expansion of power wasn't without its critics. Concerns about overreach, about the potential for abuse, were raised repeatedly. But Hoover, with his iron grip on the agency and his mastery of political maneuvering, seemed almost untouchable. He built an empire within the government, an empire built on secrets and the unwavering belief in his own righteousness. And what of the individuals caught in the Bureau's web? The activists whose movements were disrupted, the citizens whose lives were scrutinized, the reputations that were tarnished by suspicion. Their stories are often lost in the grand narrative of national security, but they are an integral part of the FBI's complex legacy. The Bureau's methods, while often effective in achieving their stated goals, also raised profound questions about the balance between security and freedom. The use of informants, the clandestine surveillance, the power to investigate and prosecute. These were all tools that, in the wrong hands, could be used to suppress dissent and silence opposition. And J. Edgar Hoover, with his decades at the helm, became synonymous with the FBI itself. He was a figure of immense power, a man who held secrets about virtually everyone who mattered in American public life. His influence was undeniable, his methods often controversial, but his impact on the shaping of American power, from the streets of Chicago to the corridors of Washington, is a story that cannot be ignored. So, let's delve deeper into the methods, the triumphs, and the controversies that defined this extraordinary agency. How did the FBI, from its humble beginnings, become such a formidable force? And what does its history tell us about the nature of power in a democracy? The mid-20th century saw the FBI solidify its position as a central pillar of American law enforcement and national security. J. Edgar Hoover, now firmly entrenched as director, wielded influence that extended far beyond the confines of the Justice Department. He was a master of public relations, carefully crafting the FBI's image as an incorruptible force dedicated to protecting the nation from all threats. But beneath the carefully constructed facade of heroism, Hoover was building something far more complex. He understood that true power lay not just in apprehending criminals, but in controlling information. He initiated programs that collected vast amounts of data on individuals and organizations, creating extensive files that would become an unparalleled repository of secrets. These files weren't just about criminal activity. They documented political affiliations, personal relationships, and even rumored indiscretions. And Hoover wasn't afraid to use this information. He employed it to silence critics, to pressure politicians, and to maintain his own formidable grip on power. The civil rights movement, for instance, became a major focus of Hoover's attention. While publicly professing to uphold the law, Hoover harbored a deep distrust of civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. He viewed the movement as a potential communist-inspired threat to national stability. Under Hoover's direction, the FBI launched extensive surveillance operations against King and other activists. They bugged hotel rooms, intercepted mail, and employed informants to gather compromising material. The goal was not just to monitor, but to discredit and disrupt the movement. One of the most infamous episodes involved a campaign to pressure King into suicide. The FBI sent anonymous letters, attempting to blackmail him with intimate details of his personal life, hoping to drive him to despair. This was a stark example of the Bureau's willingness to employ morally questionable tactics in the pursuit of its perceived objectives. This era also saw the FBI's role in combating organized crime reach new heights. The rise of the mafia, with its intricate networks and pervasive corruption, presented a formidable challenge. Hoover, however, was initially reluctant to focus on the mafia, preferring to concentrate on what he termed political radicals. It was only after significant pressure from other law enforcement agencies and a growing public outcry that the FBI began to seriously target organized crime. The development of sophisticated investigative techniques, the use of wiretaps, and the cultivation of informants eventually led to the dismantling of many powerful crime families. This was a significant victory for federal law enforcement, demonstrating the Bureau's capacity for effective action against deeply entrenched criminal enterprises. But even as they achieved these successes, the question of the FBI's power and its potential for abuse continued to loom large. Hoover's paranoia and his absolute control over the Bureau created an environment where dissent was not tolerated. Agents who questioned his directives or strayed from his vision often found their careers jeopardized. The Vietnam War and the anti-war movement also brought the FBI into direct conflict with a segment of the American population. The Bureau engaged in widespread surveillance of anti-war activists, viewing them as potential threats to national security. This surveillance often blurred the lines between legitimate investigation and political repression. Hoover believed that any challenge to government policy was a sign of subversion. He saw dissent as a disease that needed to be eradicated. And the FBI, under his leadership, became a powerful tool in that eradication. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963 remains one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. While the Warren Commission concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, questions about potential FBI involvement or cover-ups have persisted for decades. The Bureau's handling of intelligence leading up to the assassination and its subsequent investigations have been subjected to intense scrutiny. The sheer volume of information the FBI accumulated on American citizens was staggering. They had files on millions of people, creating a chilling effect on free speech and association. The fear of being watched, of being labeled a suspect, was a powerful deterrent to political activism and social change. J. Edgar Hoover's reign lasted for an unprecedented 48 years. He died in office in 1972, leaving behind an agency that was both revered and feared. His legacy was one of immense power, but also one of profound controversy. He had transformed the FBI from a nascent investigative body into a formidable intelligence and law enforcement apparatus, deeply intertwined with the fabric of American power. His death marked a turning point for the Bureau. Without his singular, iron-fisted control, the agency began to face increased oversight and accountability. Congress, spurred by revelations of abuses, began to implement reforms aimed at curbing the FBI's unchecked power. The Church Committee, a series of congressional investigations in the mid-1970s, exposed the extent of the FBI's illegal activities, including mail openings, break-ins, and the use of informants to disrupt political groups. These revelations led to significant changes in the Bureau's charter and its oversight mechanisms. The FBI's approach to national security also evolved. The focus shifted from broad-based political surveillance to more targeted investigations of specific threats, such as terrorism and organized crime. The agency began to embrace new technologies and methodologies to adapt to the changing landscape of crime and security. But the fundamental questions raised by Hoover's tenure continued to resonate. How does a nation balance the need for security with the protection of individual liberties? What are the ethical boundaries of government surveillance? And how can an agency with such immense power be held accountable? The FBI's history is a testament to the enduring tension between order and freedom in a democratic society. It's a story of how an agency established to enforce the law can, in its pursuit of perceived threats, inadvertently undermine the very principles it was created to protect. The events of 9/11 marked another seismic shift in the FBI's mission and its place in American power. The terrorist attacks exposed critical intelligence failures and led to a massive restructuring of the nation's security apparatus. The FBI was tasked with becoming a leading agency in counterterrorism, working more closely with other intelligence agencies like the CIA. This new focus brought about significant changes in the Bureau's operations. More resources were dedicated to intelligence gathering, analysis, and the prevention of terrorist attacks. The agency began to hire more analysts and to develop more sophisticated methods for identifying potential threats. The Patriot Act, passed in the wake of 9/11, granted the FBI and other agencies expanded surveillance powers, sparking renewed debates about privacy and civil liberties. The balance between security and freedom was once again at the forefront of national discussion. The FBI's role in investigating cybercrime has also become increasingly important. As technology advances, so too do the methods used by criminals. The Bureau has had to adapt its strategies and develop new expertise to combat online threats, from financial fraud to state-sponsored cyber attacks. The rise of social media and the Internet has created new challenges and opportunities for the FBI. While these platforms can be used to gather intelligence and track down criminals, they also present new avenues for misinformation and foreign interference. The Bureau is constantly navigating this evolving digital landscape. Throughout its history, the FBI has been a reflection of America's anxieties, its aspirations, and its evolving understanding of power. From its origins as a small investigative unit to its current status as a global intelligence powerhouse, the Bureau has played a pivotal role in shaping the nation's domestic and international policies. Its triumphs have been undeniable, dismantling crime syndicates, thwarting terrorist plots, and bringing countless criminals to justice. But its controversies serve as a constant reminder of the potential for unchecked power, the importance of oversight, and the delicate balance required to maintain a free and secure society. The story of the FBI is not just a history of law enforcement, it's a history of America itself. It's a story about the constant struggle to define the boundaries of government power, the rights of individuals, and the very meaning of justice in a complex and ever-changing world. And as America continues to navigate the challenges of the 21st century, the FBI will undoubtedly remain a central and often debated force in shaping its destiny. The year 1972 marked a seismic shift, not just for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but for the very fabric of American power it had so intricately woven itself into. The death of J. Edgar Hoover, a man who had become synonymous with the Bureau itself, left a void that was as profound as it was unsettling. For nearly half a century, his iron grip had guided the agency, shaping its mission, its methods, and its public perception. Now, with his passing, the whispers of reform that had long been suppressed began to swell into a chorus. The sheer longevity of Hoover's tenure had, in many ways, shielded the FBI from the kind of institutional introspection that might have occurred under a more transient leadership. His singular, iron-fisted control had allowed for a cohesive, albeit often opaque, operational philosophy. But this very control, wielded with an almost obsessive dedication to his own vision of national security, had also bred an environment ripe for overreach. The seeds of controversy, sown during decades of clandestine operations and pervasive surveillance, were beginning to sprout in the fertile ground of public and congressional scrutiny. It was the revelations of the Church Committee, a Senate Select Committee established in 1975 to investigate abuses by U.S. intelligence agencies, that truly brought the FBI's shadow operations into the harsh light of day. Led by Senator Frank Church, the committee's investigations, alongside similar congressional inquiries, exposed the extent to which the Bureau had engaged in illegal activities. Mail openings, break-ins, the infiltration and disruption of political groups. These were not the actions of a mere law enforcement agency, but of a powerful entity capable of wielding significant influence over domestic dissent. The committee's findings painted a stark picture of an FBI that had, at times, acted as judge, jury, and executioner in its pursuit of perceived threats, often blurring the lines between national security and the suppression of political opposition. These revelations spurred significant changes. The Bureau's charter was re-examined, and new oversight mechanisms were put in place. The era of unchecked power, while not entirely eradicated, was certainly curtailed. The FBI was forced to confront the consequences of its past actions, and the narrative began to shift from one of unquestioned heroism to one of a more complex and often troubled legacy. The agency had to learn to navigate a new landscape, one where its operations would be subjected to greater transparency and accountability. The FBI's mission, too, began to evolve. While the fight against organized crime and traditional federal offenses remained paramount, the rise of new and evolving threats demanded a recalibration of its priorities. The latter half of the 20th century saw the agency grapple with a shifting global political landscape, the rise of domestic terrorism, and the increasing sophistication of criminal enterprises. The Cold War, a defining geopolitical struggle, had already cemented the FBI's role in counterintelligence and the monitoring of perceived communist threats. But as the Soviet Union waned, new challenges emerged. The agency's focus broadened to encompass a wider array of national security concerns. While the broad-based political surveillance that characterized Hoover's era was, in theory, curtailed, the underlying mandate to identify and neutralize threats to the nation remained. This often led to a delicate balancing act, a constant negotiation between the imperative of national security and the protection of individual liberties. The specter of Hoover's extensive files, though perhaps less overtly weaponized, still loomed, a testament to the power that information, even if gathered through questionable means, could wield. Then came September 11, 2001. The terrorist attacks that ripped through the heart of America, exposed critical intelligence failures, and triggered a massive restructuring of the nation's security apparatus. The FBI, once primarily a domestic law enforcement agency, found itself at the forefront of a new global war on terror. Its mission underwent a profound transformation, shifting from a reactive approach to crime to a proactive focus on preventing terrorist attacks. This seismic shift necessitated a deepening of the agency's intelligence-gathering capabilities, a move that often saw it working more closely, and sometimes more contentiously, with other intelligence agencies like the CIA. The Patriot Act, passed in the wake of 9/11, granted expanded surveillance powers, sparking renewed debates about privacy and civil liberties. The FBI's resources were increasingly dedicated to intelligence analysis, the identification of potential threats, and the development of more sophisticated methods for detecting and disrupting terrorist plots before they could be realized. This new focus required a significant investment in personnel, technology, and methodologies, fundamentally altering the operational landscape of the Bureau. In parallel with the rise of global terrorism, the FBI also had to contend with the rapidly evolving threat of cybercrime. As technology advanced and society became increasingly reliant on digital infrastructure, the methods used by criminals and by state-sponsored actors became more sophisticated. The agency had to adapt its strategies, developing new expertise to combat online threats ranging from financial fraud and identity theft to state-sponsored cyber attacks and foreign interference in democratic processes. The Internet, once a nascent tool,